Hello, my name is Mark. And we are students of Ghana Christian International High School. And we urge you all to subscribe to His Girl TV. Link in bio.
Hello there, you're welcome to His Gov TV. If today is your first time of watching our videos, I would like to remind you to subscribe to our channel. And if you have already done so, we thank you for your support. So today I want us to look at a very interesting topic. And today we are looking at the history of medicine in Ghana. Okay, and when we talk of the history of medicine in Ghana, what basically we are going to be talking about is the history of traditional medicine or traditional medical practices in the Ghanaian society before the coming of the Europeans. So we are looking at pre-colonial Ghana, when the Ghanaian, had not come into contact with the Europeans to be introduced to Western form of medicine. What was the medical practices of course practiced by our forefathers, and that is what basically we are supposed to look at. Specifically, we will look at the features of traditional medical practices. All right, so we will look at the features of traditional medical practices, some of the features. So without wasting much time, let's go in there and look at the lesson objectives for today. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to examine the features of traditional medical practices in pre-colonial Ghana. Now, what do we mean by pre-colonial Ghana? So what we mean by pre-colonial Ghana, we are talking about the period before the African or the Ghanaian came into contact with the Europeans. So the period before the coming of the Europeans is what we called the pre-colonial era or period. So that time, what were some of the features of traditional medical practices in the Ghanaian society, and then in Africa and even in West Africa as a whole? Now let's take a look at the next. Our lesson objectives is that by the end of this lesson, we should be able to discuss how traditional men, treated diseases and illness in pre-colonial period or era. So bear in mind that before the coming of the Europeans, who later came to introduce Western form of medicine, whereby we came to have paracetamol, we came to have a hospital and all of that. The diseases that we are confronted with today as a people, as Ghanaians, as Africans, were still in existence even before the coming of the Europeans. So diseases like malaria, chickenpox, leprosy, all the diseases you can think of that we are confronted today as a people was there before the Europeans came. And so the question is, how were our forefathers treating those diseases? Because we all know that when you get malaria, we know what happens to you. And don't also forget that we've also had evidence to prove that malaria had been there since. Some of even the missionaries died because of malaria. So how was our forefathers treating these kind of diseases? And so we will look at the methods. So the second objective has to do with the methods, okay? The methods used in the treating of this illness. That is how traditional men, so that is the method. So bear in mind, these are the two objectives that we should have at the back of our mind as we move on in our discussion. So let's begin with the introduction. So medicine had been an integral part of the social life of the people of Ghana from ages, past. Okay, and this profession was deeply rooted and was practiced by both men and women with traditional skills. So it is often said by most Western historians that our Africans were barbaric, or even in Western books that Africans were uncivilized, Africans were barbaric, Africans knew nothing. But those barbaric people were the ones who were healing themselves. And the act of medicine, you can't take medicine away from man, because even in the Bible, God instructed man to use certain herbs for medicinal purpose. So God even knew that definitely diseases is part of man, and diseases from day one, from the day you are born, you are not free from diseases. So it shouldn't be that it was the Europeans who came to introduce medicine to us. That is not true. And today there are so many misconceptions about traditional medicine. And this is basically because of what the Europeans told, or the brainwashed that they did to some of our forefathers. So it has made some of us feel that traditional medicine is backward or is awkward, which is very, 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 very untrue. Now, this type of medicine had been with the Ghanaian or the African. And both men and women, they all engage in this form of medicine. And they do that using traditional skills. Good. Now, nobody exactly knows when traditional medicine developed in Ghana or in West Africa. It probably developed when the people saw the need to keep people healthy in the face of of diseases. Well, if you want to know when it started, I think it started from Adam and Eve, because God told them. God gave them that instruction. So it has been part of every civilization, every generation, because yeah. So before the introduction of Western medication in this country, medication was mainly based on the use of time-tested, and I like this, time-tested medicines, or what, herbs. Time-tested what? Medicines or herbs. So before the introduction of Western of course, medicine, and you all know what Western medicine is. That is the paracetamol and of course the pharmaceutical, medicines. There were some time-tested medicines that were very effective in treating certain diseases, and some of these medicines were found in herbs, a lot of them. Now, there were medicine men. We don't call them doctors, but they were known as herbalists in those days. Medicine men, herbalists. In traditional terms, they will say odunsini, who were skilled in the use of the natural medicine. The word is what? Natural medicine or herbs for the treatment of diseases and illness that afflicted the people. So natural what? Medicine or herbs. Medicine or herbs, natural. All the medicines, the Western medicines that we consume today as a people, as an African, they are all artificial because they have mixed it with chemicals. But the African choose natural herbs, acting on the instruction of God. Now, the people treated all kinds of diseases, and these diseases range from both physical and spiritual. The physical diseases included malaria, chickenpox, and others, while the spiritual diseases included mental alignments. So bear in mind that the African, because the African is so religious, they believe that certain diseases are caused by spiritual factors. So no matter what you do, you can't solve it. You must solve it spiritually. They also believe that there are also certain physical causes of diseases. So causes and effect. When you do this, this can happen to you. However, they also believe that there is spirituality to some of the diseases that afflicted men. And some of these diseases was what? Mental alignment. Good. So now let's go in there and look at the features of traditional medical practices, because you can be asked to do that. Now, the first feature in the traditional Ghanaian society was that the knowledge about the treatment of the diseases that we have talked about or that afflicted the people was acquired by the medicine men. And these medicine men who passed it to their younger generation. So this is what the informal education that the Ghanaian or the African was introduced to. So the medicine men, and because the knowledge of the treatment or about the treatment of diseases were passed on from generation to generation, it means that if you do not have a medicine man in your family, it means you had to go and learn from somewhere. So very often you realize that the medicine men are normally people who come from the same family line, because if your father is a medicine man, definitely he's going to teach you. You also teach your kids. You teach your kids. So you realize that some kind of family may come to have more medicine men than the other. I mean, it's just like today, if you have a father who is a doctor, you are likely to have other siblings being, in the same profession. That is the same thing that happened. So one feature was that there wasn't any school for the people to go in there to go and learn, as in a structure where today people go to medicine school for 6 years, 8 years, and all of that. These knowledge of medicine and treatment of diseases were passed on from your father being a medicine man. All right, good. So that was one feature. Another feature was that knowledge on medication was also obtained through dreams and visions. Knowledge of medication. Sometimes the medicine men could also have dreams and then also visions, whereby they will be shown a particular herb which was very effective against a particular illness, and so they go into the forest, cut these herbs, and use them to cure the diseases that has afflicted the person. Now, the next thing was that knowledge on medication could also come from the spirit gods. So, the people or the Ghanaian or the pre-colonial Ghanaian worshipped so many deities, more than one god, because each of these gods were associated with a particular role. Some were responsible for fertility, some were responsible for long life, some were responsible for prosperity. So we had some deities that were responsible for the treatment of certain medicines, and so very often the medicine men will consult these gods to give them the knowledge on certain medications, and normally these gods will reveal these medications in the form of dreams, as we saw in the previous one. Now, the next one was that in the traditional Ghanaian society, there was also the use of charms and talismans was also a feature in traditional medical practices. Charms and talisman. Now, these charms and talisman were somehow known as preventive methods. They were given to the sick person or even people who are not sick, thinking that it will protect them from any harmful any harmful spirit, because I have already indicated that the people believe in the fact that spirit may also cause certain diseases, and therefore they had to protect themselves against these spirits. So don't think that these charms and talismans were given to people to prevent malaria. No. The medicine men who were giving these charms and talismans, or people who were wearing these charms and talismans, know that they were not wearing it for the prevention of malaria, but for attacks, okay, in the spiritual realm that can cause a disease. That is what of course, the talisman and co were for. Because indeed, today we can have some diseases that when you take to the hospital, no matter what the doctors will do, you realize that the person's situation or condition will continue to deteriorate. Nothing is happening, and even the doctors can confirm to you that this is not a hospital sickness, and they say it all the time. So if it is not a hospital sickness, then what is it? And the moment they take this same person to some medicine, some herbal man, and all the gods are consulted and all of that, you realize that the person start getting better. So yeah, they have a really good course. Now let's move on to the next one. Pre-colonial medicine of Ghana also involved the female fraternity who were specialized in midwifery. And this is one interesting thing I found about the African. And this is one of the most interesting things I love about the African. You see, before the coming of the Europeans, don't forget, children were born. People were giving birth. And the children or the people that were giving birth were not giving birth in hospitals. They were giving birth in their homes, in their houses. So we had some old women. Of course, normally they were the aged because they had learned a lot. Old women who were specialized in midwifery. Men were not involved in midwifery. It was only the women, of course, that were involved in midwifery. And these women did their work so well that you hardly hear that somebody gave birth in the house in those days in pre-colonial time and died in the house. They seem to know every bit of what is happening to the person. And these people have never been to school. As today we have nurses who go to school or midwives go to school to learn. But they knew every intricate issues with regards to childbirth. And after the introduction of Western medicine, some countries are even banning traditional birth attendants. We call them traditional birth attendants. Like Sierra Leone, I learned, have banned traditional birth attendants. I don't know why, but you can share your views in the comment section. Today we hear of postnatal deaths, after birth deaths, people die here and there because of bleeding here and there. But these news where you hardly hear them in those days. So there were also female fraternity that were also specialized in midwifery, and that was also a feature of the traditional medical practices. Now, medicine in the pre-colonial era also involved sometimes the use of sacrifice and offerings on behalf of the afflicted. So sometimes sacrifices are performed, and these are associated with diseases that are believed to have been caused by from the spirit world, not sacrifice for malaria, please. And lastly, the traditional Ghanaian medicine also involved the use of men who dealt with alignments like fracture, of course, bone fractures. So we also had some medicine men who were also specialized in the treatment of bone fracture, that's the broken bones. And like we have today doctors who are specialized in the treating of the teeth, the nose, the eye, the whatever, heart and all of that. That's the same way. Some traditional men were also specialized in the treatment of alignment, that's bone fractures. If you have a broken bone in your leg, they will fix it for you. And normally, of course, normally what they do is that they break the leg of either a chicken or another animal, and then they apply a medicine on that chicken's leg, When after some days, when the chicken's leg is able to heal, then they'll apply it to your leg. This is how they try and tested medicines. And these things have been, I mean, if you read the histories about European medicines, this is how they test medicines, and they do it so well. I was once at a barbering shop, and there was a guy who said a tree fell on his leg because he was cutting trees in the forest, and a big tree fell on his leg. If you look at the guy's leg, my God, the guy said he went to a medicine man. He just paid like 100 cedis or 200 because he knew the man, and the guy was healed. But you can see that the leg, the bone is actually fractured. Like, even though it is healed, you can see that no, something awkward has happened to that leg. So some men were also into that because people's bones have been broken ever since, and they had to find ways and means to solve them, and they did it so well. Good. So that's the first part of the objectives. Now let's take a look at the second part of the objectives. How men treated diseases. That is the methods involved in the treatment of the diseases. How diseases were treated, and that is what we are supposed to look at. Okay. So the first method involved in the treatment of diseases in pre-colonial times was the use of what? Of course, herbal or herbs. So herbs, trees, leaves, bark of trees were used to treat certain diseases. So the medicine men, they normally have a knowledge about the various trees and herbs and leaves that are effective for the teaching of certain diseases, and so they will normally go into the forest to cut those herbs to treat those kind of diseases. All right, yes. So for malaria and co, you can have some trees, some herbs that you can, use. Now the next one was the smearing method. The smearing method. So some diseases were also treated with the use of the smearing method, whereby the medicine man would prepare a pap from trees, from leaves, of course from herbs, and then they will apply it or smear it on the body that ache or hurt that particular person. Now the smearing method was used to treat diseases like headache, boils, and also body pains. That is what the smearing method was used for. Okay, now the next one was also this method was the cutting open. We call it the cutting open method, which was used by the medicine men to treat what we call stubborn boils. Stubborn boils? Yes. So stubborn boils. Stubborn boils. A boils is a pompo, yeah, in the Akan, of course, language. So this is how they did it. Now, usually the herbalist made 3 or 4 long cuts, okay, in the balls, okay, and usually the herbalist, of course, will made a storm with a fire-based sterilized knife. Now, after the ball had been cut open, then the herbalist would allow the wound, to separate, all right, or to heal. And then they apply some medicine to allow the wounds to cure and close. And then the herbalist would also use incisions to remove clot, blood. So some balls were cut open, and then the medicines were then added or applied on it. The next one was also the use of concoctions were also prepared from certain of course herbs, and also given to the person to also drink. Now they usually boiled the herbs in water, okay, and then made the sick person to drink it after it had cooled down. Now this method was used to treat minor diseases, of course, such as stomach ache, guinea worm infections, and worm infections, and then etc., etc. So that is what the concussion was also about. Now, they also had a system or another method has to do with isolation or quarantine of committed, and these were used for highly contagious or what infectious diseases. And during the COVID time, we saw quarantine and isolation very well. All right. Now, in such cases, the patients were uh, isolated to the outskirts of the town, mostly in the outskirts of the city, and they will not have contact with the other people. So the medicine men apply the medicine on the bodies of of such people. Notable, of course, medicines that were uh, of course, that used this method was the smallpox or leprosy or chickenpox. And these diseases, when you allow the person to stay with you, they will also affect other people. So the person had to go into the outskirts of the city to be treated. And during the COVID time, we saw how people were being treated. So that's how the isolation method was used. Now, the next one is the sniff application. Sorry, of course, method. The sniff application method. Now, the herbalist made the sick use a sniff. So sneezing will then allow all the impurities to clear from the nose of the patient to open for healing. So sometimes they allow the person to sniff some herbs, uh, and when you sniff, you may want to sneeze, and once you sneeze, all the impurities will just come out. Another method of treating the disease was the use of herbs for rubbing the body. So they use the herbs to also rub the body, and usually at times in a prolonged and difficult labor. Some herbs were rubbed on the belly of the woman to induce delivery of the baby. So at times when a woman is in labor and it's very difficult for the woman to to deliver, sometimes they use this method, the rubbing method, whereby they apply herbs on the woman so that she can give birth smoothly. Now, also have the prevention method. Okay, we also have the prevention of method, and this prevention method, as I said, in those days, who served protective, and then so that's the use of the arms and talismans, okay, to protect against enemies. And sometimes cuts were made in the body and the medicine were inserted for protection of the body. So that is the prevention of method has to do with the charms and the talisman. And the last one is the healing by proxy. The healing by what? By proxy. And now the traditional Ghanaian medicine also involved medicine men who, trade or dealt with alignment like fracture. Now, these experts did not have access to modern medical facility, yet they could set broken bones. They could set broken bones, and usually they will break, as I earlier on indicated, or as I earlier indicated, they will break the leg of a chicken, and at times they apply a medicine to the leg, and they expect that as the leg of the chicken heals, so the individual's leg will also healed. And sometimes they apply the same of course medicine to the individual. So they break the leg of the chicken, and then they dress it like the way they have dressed that of the individual's of course fractured bone. Then they apply the medicines on it, hoping that when the chicken's leg is healed, the individual should also be healed. So that is the proxy. That is what we mean by healing by proxy. Yeah. So we've had a very interesting conversation. So you try your hands on these questions as you have seen, and don't forget, in 2020, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, this question was asked 5 features, and all these are past questions. Have a nice day, and thank you for your time.